Oh, goodness gracious. Man, that was loud. You see, when I type on this keyboard over here, I bump my microphone control from time to time. Sorry about that. North to south, coast to coast, around the world, this is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We report the news, truthfully, honestly, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's just my opinion. It most certainly is not the news. But it is just as valuable as yours, and that's why we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate, we do it every single day, Monday through Friday, from 2 until 5 p.m. Central Time, except for this week. I'll be doing the Thanksgiving Eve edition of the Wells Report tomorrow. Then I'll take a few days off and enjoy the holiday, and I hope you do too. And God bless you and yours. And once again, thanks very much for joining us here on the Wells Report. There is breaking news. It's about 8 minutes old. The Supreme Court today declined a request from Donald Trump to block the release of his tax returns to a House committee seeking them. This is the latest legal setback the former president has endured from a court he helped to shape. President Trump asked the High Court on October 31st to intervene in his long-running legal battle with the House Ways and Means Committee over access to years of his tax returns. Since then, President Trump has announced he will run for president again in 2024, and Republicans flipped enough seats to take control of the House of Representatives next year. The court denied President Trump's request without comment, which is common on the emergency docket. There were noted dissents. The battle over President Trump's taxes dates back years. Democrats in 2019 sought copies of his returns from the Treasury Department after President Trump flouted tradition by declining to release them as a candidate in 2016. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit ruled against President Trump in late October, declining to reconsider an August ruling by a 3-judge panel that unanimously sided with a House committee in the dispute. The Supreme Court's decision came after it ruled against President Trump last month in another emergency case dealing with documents seized over the summer at Mar-a-Lago. In that case, former president had asked the court to allow an independent arbiter or special master to review about 100 classified documents. President Trump's post-presidency record at the Supreme Court is not particularly good, even though he nominated 3 of the court's current associate justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. In January, the Supreme Court refused to block the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol attack from getting Trump's administration documents. In 2020, the court ruled that President Trump could not keep his tax returns and financial records away from a New York City prosecutor who was prosecuting and pursuing possible hush money payments during the 2016 White House race. President Trump's lawyers argued the latest case raised important questions about the separation of powers that will affect every future president. They are correct. Chief Justice John Roberts, who handles emergency appeals from the D.C. Circuit, temporarily delayed the case to give the parties a chance to submit written arguments. Time is running short for Democrat efforts to obtain the records. When Republicans take control of the House early next year, they are almost certain to drop the request. 3 GOP candidates for the Ways and Means Committee chairman told CNBC earlier this month they would not pursue the former president's tax returns. In 2016, when President Trump made this decision, I said at the time that it was a mistake. And he came back, not from me personally, of course, but that argument had been made by other people. And what ended up happening is the president said, well, I'm under perpetual audit by the IRS. I'm not going to release my tax returns while they are still under audit, which was completely understandable. Because, remember, this is not a legal proceeding. As we have found out, where President Trump is concerned, the 5th and 6th Amendments simply do not apply. That being said, actually, the 4th, too, considering these are his personal papers, but let's just move on. So what ended up happening is that he found himself in a position where he did not release his tax returns. What I said was this. I said, President Trump, here's what you do. You tell the IRS and anybody else who's interested that as soon as the IRS finishes up their audits of your tax returns, you will be more than happy to release them to the public. That is something he did not do. This issue has come up several times, as you well know. And I've said the same thing every time. Mr. President, you're making a mistake. And he is. And here comes more of it. Now, in point of fact, these documents are pretty much in the public record anyway. They are in the possession of the New York District Attorney. And so, had there been anything on those tax returns that was, shall we say, provocative, then it's very likely that we would know about it already, which takes us right back to the situation in 2016. Mr. President, why did you fight this fight? Why did you pick this fight? Why would you do something like that? There are certain forms and traditions. The form and tradition of presidential candidates releasing far too much information about themselves is part and parcel of the crazy political system that we find ourselves in. And you have to understand that, especially considering the current president, when it comes to records that may or may not show things that are deleterious to their political efforts, it depends on what party you're in as to whether or not you're going to be in a situation where these people are going to start chasing you down. And so President Trump, being in the wrong political party, is being chased down by the House Ways and Means Committee. They've been trying to do this for a long time. This is a trophy on the wall for those people. And because President Biden is a Democrat, while President Trump enjoys the attentions of a special prosecutor, Hunter Biden and indeed Joe Biden do not. And by the way, the evidence for a special prosecutor looking into President Biden's business deals is far more solid, far more documented, far more, shall we say, together than some anonymous dossier put together by a bitter ex-British intelligence worker. And yet, no special prosecutor? No Biden version of the Mueller report? No. So once again, I'm not saying this is not what I'm saying is it's not about tit for tat, because wrongdoing is wrongdoing is wrongdoing. But so far, President Trump has been investigated time after time after time. There's no wrongdoing. Hunter and Joe Biden have not been investigated at all, as near as I can tell, except by people that are looking at the laptop, et cetera, journalistic efforts that are tepid at best. And yet, the Department of Justice seems to have no interest whatsoever in the graft and corruption that those particular reporters show. Langston points out that he's not under audit from 10 years ago. Let me ask you this question. Langston is I was not able to look up, this just happened, okay? Do me a favor and check out just exactly what the House Ways and Means Committee is looking for when it comes to his tax returns, and send me a link, would you? I would appreciate that. Let's see. Once again, Trump lied about what? What did he lie about? Also, the evidence is far more solid. Yes. The evidence of Joe Biden's wrongdoing is far more solid. Absolutely. Considering that the evidence of, say, for example, Trump's wrongdoing doesn't exist, at least to this point. Will that change? Who knows? Who knows? We'll see. But by the way, if somebody could, Langston, try to find out just exactly what the House Ways and Means Committee are looking for. If those are 10 years old, that's perfectly fine with me. Once again, I have no idea why President Trump is fighting this fight. Now, the possibility exists that maybe the President Trump, is looking at this and saying, well, this can be twisted into some kind of political issue by politicians looking for a political issue. That's a real concern, considering how everything else has been twisted into a political issue regarding President Trump. Remember, there are no real rules to political prosecutions or persecutions, if you'd rather. There are no rules. In other words, there's no confronting your accuser. There's no right to self-defense. Blah 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 blah. And that's something we probably have to do something about. So they wanted them starting with 2013 and ending when? Are they talking about the last 10 years, or are they talking about 2013 through 2003 through 2013? Do you have any idea? Like I said, this popped up just as the music started on this broadcast today. So I'm gonna, when I get to a break here in a couple of minutes, what I'll do is I'll go back and look for myself. Let's see. Alan Schaefer pops in. The House Ways and Means Committee argued that it needs the information contained in Trump's tax returns to meaningfully evaluate the IRS's presidential audit program. Well, that makes sense. Oh, ending in 2018, so they're going back 5 years. Thanks, Langston. I appreciate that. Let me ask you this, Alan. The House Ways and Means Committee argued that it needs the information contained in Trump's tax returns to meaningfully evaluate the IRS's presidential audit program. Do you believe that that's the limit of the scope that the House Ways and Means Committee is looking at, or are they going to, say, for example, spill anything that they find that they think there might be some political advantage in? Which do you think might happen? Do you have any idea? What do you think? By the way, our telephone number, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Mike, why should I watch that movie? It kind of spooks me just a little bit, considering how Michael Hastings kind of lives up to the title of that film. So I know this is something, since you're not seeing the chat room, you're sitting there going, who's he talking to and why? What? And who's Michael Hastings? Well, he was a reporter that said he had a huge story and that he was going to go underground. And that's exactly what happened. His Mercedes Benz, for whatever reason, accelerated to well over 100 miles an hour on Woodward Boulevard in LA and crashed into a tree, burst into flames, and killed him dead as a nit. And people are looking at that going, really? Let's see, I take them at their word. If they do otherwise, they'll have some explaining to do. Me too. I agree 100%. But this was a mistake. This was a mistake by President Trump, and I have no idea why he made it. I have no idea why he made that particular decision. I mean, okay. I mean, especially in hindsight, good heavens to Betsy. Good heavens to Betsy. We got a situation here where they're going to twist everything they possibly can about you, President Trump, into some sort of political food fight. I mean, it doesn't make any difference whether if you don't give it to them, they give you a political food fight. If you do give them to you, you're going to be involved in a political food fight. You're going to tear your rotator cuff throwing food back and forth anyway. So let the games begin. Does that make sense to anybody but me? I'm just asking. Yeah. This is the Wells Report. Hi, my name is John David Wells. Welcome to the broadcast. Thanks very much for being here. Again, our telephone number, 817-379-2172. Back with more coming up in just one moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. I want to thank the greatest symphonic percussionist I know, John Thomas. He has joined Patreon.com and is throwing me a couple of bucks a month. Thank you, JT. God bless you, man. He's the coolest person ever. Renaissance guy? He's a Renaissance man. I'm telling you. No. Real Renaissance guy. That being said, he has been a stalwart friend of mine ever since we were kids. I mean, like 1970, 71, 72. I mean, kids. I'm not kidding. So he and I are still best friends, and he has joined Patreon.com and has tossed me a couple of bucks a month. You can too. Go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. I just sent a note to everybody who's been taking care of me regarding this with Patreon. Also, I've got to say thanks to Kelly Lyons, who is another donator to the broadcast. But if you'd like to be a part of that club, by all means, do so. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. Man, I talk fast. That's patreon.com/The Wells Report. A buck or two, that's fine. Some people give more, some people give less, and that's perfectly fine. And I appreciate every bit of it. Thank you. Do you know the name John Paul Mack? Or John Paul Mack Isaac, actually. Do you know that name? He is the computer repair guy that got a hold of Hunter Biden's laptop. He's written a book called American Injustice. He was explaining it on Fox News that he's been working closely with members of Congress as their planned investigation into Hunter Biden nears. He said he has provided clean copies of the laptop's contents and reported every interaction he's had with the FBI. I see holding the FBI accountable for colluding with our mainstream and social media to block a story, a real story with real consequences, said Mr. Isaac of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Also, to get to the bottom of what the Biden family was up to when Joe Biden was vice president. Remember, most of this occurred when President Biden was Vice President Biden. Yesterday, Mack expressed optimism about the new class of Republicans who have secured a majority in the House as they plan investigations of the Biden family. We have people in Congress now. They have the resources and the tools, and I'm hoping they're going to get some accountability. Mack described one of his first interactions with an FBI agent as chilling. Check this out. First, he was overjoyed when the agents handed him a subpoena. He made a comment that he would change their names when he eventually wrote the book. Here's a quote. That's when Agent Mike turned around and told me that in their experience, nothing ever happens to people that don't talk about these things. Mack Isaac said that he did, in fact, change the names in the book. The comment, Mr. Isaac said, was a warning against speaking out about what was going on. And while he has said that Americans should be able to go to authorities without fear of retribution, he has experienced otherwise. I've been dealing with retaliation from multiple fronts for the past 2 years when what I did was leaked to the country. I'm expecting it, and I'm going to expect it to continue. When people are threatened, they fight back, he said. His book, American Injustice, is set to be released today. I'm going to go and purchase a copy. Yes, it's quite possible that I could get a promotional copy if I contact his publisher, but I'm not going to do that because I'm going to put some money in that guy's pocket. And I think you should too as well. Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. My name is John David Wells. This is The Wells Report. News, analysis, commentary, debate, honesty, fairness, real information. Because we got to have it. And the mainstream media is, for all intents and purposes, dead. And that's why you're here, and thank you very much for being here, and I'll be back with more of this broadcast coming up in just a couple of moments. Again, this is The Wells Report. It's also Tuesday. Back in a second. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. I just realized I forgot to take off my hoodie. It's been chilly around here the last few days. Temperatures got all the way down into the 30s. You're sitting there north of the Mason-Dixon line going, yeah, tell me about it. Let's see, I saw that Kelly Lyons was on the chat. I don't know whether or not she's still there, but Kel, do me a favor, give me a buzz on the next break, okay? It's going to be a while, but give me a buzz, would you? Also, Curtis Charles has shown up. Love the man. The best broadcast partner I ever worked with. We did public address announcing for Las Vegas Motor Speedway and that entire speed racing complex. And he is literally the best race announcer in the United States. He absolutely is. And I sincerely appreciate the fact that he hangs out every now and then and touches base with me. We stay in touch, and it's good. So, what is going on with regards to the election that turned from election day into election season? Well, there's still races that are out there. The control of the various houses has already been set. There may be they may have the same 50-50 mix, which gives the Democrat Party control of the Senate. That hangs on a December 6th runoff in Georgia. However, there are several other uncalled races. California has 2 of 4 uncalled races, predominantly a vote-by-mail state, meaning every registered voter is automatically mailed a ballot 29 days before Election Day. With 22 million registered voters and weeks-long processing times, this means the race calls can move very slowly in the Golden State. They need to do what, in my humble opinion, so I need to go to the opinion camera. In my humble opinion, see how television works? In my humble opinion, California needs to have all the mail-in ballots counted by Election Day. Everybody needs to do that. It can be done. Why isn't it done? And you can draw your various conclusions from that question, which is mostly rhetorical. Anyway, you can draw your conclusions as you see fit. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on. This is ridiculous. California still has over 500,000 ballots uncounted, 593,925. This is according to estimates from the California Secretary of State's office. Of the unprocessed ballots remaining, 500,000 were mailed in. 500,000 of them were mailed in to election officials. California permits election authorities 1 month to complete tallying, which means voters could be waiting as late as December 8th for final race outcomes. Absolutely ridiculous. In California's 3rd congressional district, Republican Kevin Kiley holds a commanding lead over Kermit Jones. However, approximately only a little over half of the ballots have been counted in the likely Republican race. You know, I reported this last week a couple of times, and I think the week before that, as we started keeping track of all of this, and they still had about 500,000 ballots, or a little half of the ballots have been counted in that race. A commanding lead. Why hasn't somebody called it? Well, your guess is as good as mine. California accepts mail-in ballots, and I already told you about that. The second uncalled race lies in the state's 13th congressional district. It's a toss-up among the tightest remaining. Republican John Duarte narrowly leads Democrat Adam Gray by less than 800 votes. In Alaska, this is interesting. The at-large congressional district remains uncalled, held up by the voting counting process of the state's newly implemented ranked choice voting system. That means that as many candidates that can qualify for further counting, well, they qualify for further counting, and further counting goes on. The race has been rated by Fox News Power Rankings as leaning Democrat as the result of the ranked choice system that gives incumbent Democrat Representative Mary Peltola an advantage over her Republican opponents, former Governor Sarah Palin and Nick Begich. I suspect that if the Republicans had been able to figure out which of those candidates they would like to have actually in the seat, then the Republicans would have a better chance. Peltola led the first round of the votes. Palin was second, Begich in third, but failed to secure 50%, meaning those who voted for the candidate with the least number of votes will have their second choice vote reallocated to the other candidates until one reaches 50%. It's a mess. Election officials will commence counting of second and third place votes November 23rd. That is tomorrow, meaning that Alaskans may know the final outcome of the race by the end of the day if all goes as expected. In Colorado predominantly votes by mail, but processing is much swifter than California. In 2020, 90% of the votes was counted by Wednesday morning after Election Day, according to the Associated Press, even though mail-in ballots from out-of-state and overseas military service members can arrive as late as tomorrow, as long as they were postmarked by Election Day. Incumbent Republican Lauren Boebert, thank you, Alan Schaefer of Arizona, for correcting my pronunciation. In my own defense, Boebert is commonly pronounced Babert, but not in this case. Lauren Boebert was not expected to have a close race with her Democrat opponent, Adam Frisch, in the likely Republican seat. You know what I'm thinking? I think he already backed off of that. I think let me double check this. Let's see, when was this? November 22nd. So Fox News is behind the curve there, because Ms. Babert, I believe, has already claimed the seat. So I'm going to move on. Though the race qualifies, blah, 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 blah. So that's it. All right. So that's the story there. All right. With regards to that. Now, a story that we broke yesterday and is just getting reported by the mainstream media today has to do with the Assistant Attorney General of the state of Arizona sending a singeing letter to the election officials of Maricopa County in Arizona, asking very difficult questions and demanding certain statistics from Maricopa County regarding the vote count. There are serious problems there. There are sworn affidavits from election workers that were watching. This is not one of those things where there isn't a solid case for looking into this election. And in the balance hangs the governor's race between Kari Lake and Katie Hobbs. So what happened is that the Attorney General said that Maricopa County was going to have to answer all these questions and take all these steps that were demanded in that letter, which, by the way, I read to you yesterday, by November 28th, which is when the vote has to be certified. Now, one of the Republican counties decided that they were going to stand in solidarity with the Assistant Attorney General and hold up their canvass until November 28th. A second Republican-controlled Arizona county delayed certifying their results of this month's election as a protest against voting issues in Maricopa County that GOP officials have blamed for their losses in top races, including the contest for governor. Now, remember, this is the Associated Press, and so this will be biased. The delay comes as Maricopa, the state's most populous county, finished counting the last remaining ballots, and the state attorney general demanded that officials there explain election day problems some voters experienced. One of those election day problems involved taking uncounted, untabulated votes and commingling them with tabulated and counting votes, effectively making those votes disappear. That is not a good thing. And so that has to be sorted out, and that has to be taken care of. Arizona voters elected, according to the Associated Press, Arizona voters elected a Democrat governor, Katie Hobbs, and gave Democrat Senator Mark Kelly a full 6-year term in office, but the race for attorney general was headed to a mandatory recount once the election is certified by all 15 counties and the Secretary of State. Democrat Chris Mays ended up ahead of Republican Abraham Hamadeh by just 510 votes on Monday after Maricopa County counted about 1,300 remaining ballots. Alan Schaefer was with us here on the chat room. Alan, do you have any other further information? If you could share that with us, I sure would appreciate it. You can give me a buzz if you want to. I'd love to talk to you. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. I'd like to know what's being talked about in Arizona, and it would be great to hear from you. The split vote by the Board of Supervisors in Mojave County in northwest Arizona came with an explicit vow to certify the election on November 28th. Members called it a political statement to show how upset they were with issues in Maricopa County, home to Phoenix and 60% of the state voters. The all-Republican boards of two other counties, Pinal and La Paz, also voted with little fanfare to certify their election results. Mojave has become the second state county to delay certification following Cochise County in the southeastern part of Arizona. The board there made its decision on Friday without a promise to certify the results by the deadline for doing so, despite setting a meeting to consider it. Instead, the two Republicans who constitute a majority on the board demanded the Secretary of State prove their vote counting machines were legally certified, which is something that apparently did not happen. One of the things that came out of this story that we reported yesterday was that there was indeed a test of the printing protocols, the printing machines that print the ballots and then are put into the tabulator. What happened after that test was the tabulators, about 30% of them, and it depends on who you read the story from, approximately, he said he doesn't live in Arizona? Well, why not? He should live in Arizona. He knows everything there is to know. Let's see. Anyway, so what happened is that the printers malfunctioned. In fact, according to the Assistant Attorney General, the printing settings were non-standard. And you know those things have got to be standardized. I don't know what's going on there. All I can say is that what's happening is indeed, all I can say is what happened is that those tabulated votes, and there were somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 30% of them, were not counted. Further, people could check out of their election system and go vote someplace else. But strangely, the poll workers who were supposedly up to date on what was necessary to check someone out of one polling place did not know how, according to this letter from the Assistant Attorney General. Did not know how to train people or to walk people through the checkout process to go to another polling place. So they had to vote a provisional ballot there, and they are counted last. With some of those provisional ballots, it got commingled with already tabulated ballots. So once again, it is a flaming mess in Arizona. It's just a flaming mess. And why that is, I don't know. Okay, here we go. Alan says that he's a Texan. His primary residence is here. He has a second home in Maricopa County. I spend a lot of time out there. I'm very aware of the political goings on in the states. Well, do me a favor, Alan. Call me right this minute at 817-379-2172. 817, here, I'll type it in for you. Give me a buzz, and I just want friendly questions. That's all I'm asking for right now. Not that I want to get in a conversation, an argument with you anyway. I don't see why we would. Let's see, 379-2172. There you go. Anyway, let's see. So he lives in Texas and Arizona and knows what's going on in political things. I just want to report from you about what you know about this vote counting and so on and so forth, and where people stand on it. You've always been very generous with being able to share what you know. And it would be nice to be able to actually go ahead and just give me some details, and the listening audience some details, and that would be cool. 817-379-2172. If you're amenable, I would appreciate it if you would be. So, in Arizona, Maricopa County, the Assistant Attorney General. By the way, Alan, I'd like to know whether the Assistant Attorney General is a Republican or not. Right? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'd like to see what you know about that particular situation. No thanks. However, I'll answer the questions here if you'd like. That'd be fine, Alan. What I need to know is this: is the Assistant Attorney General a Republican? Is this a partisan exercise, or is this an exercise of fairness, or whatever you want to call it? That's thing number one. Thing number two: just general information about what's happening and how the people of Arizona are feeling about this unbelievable circumstance, at least unbelievable to me, the circumstance surrounding the vote count in Maricopa County. What are they thinking according to you? Please let me know. Telephone number again, 817-379-2172, or you can reply on the chat. That would be perfectly fine. I'm just trying to get the whole story out there because that's kind of sort of what we do here on the Wells Report. We report the news fairly, honestly, truthfully. We do all that. No program today. Anybody having trouble getting hold of the program? I wonder. That being, I'm talking about the Wells Report. Our telephone number, as I said, 817-379-2172. Going through the news of the day. It's what we are doing on the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. You stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being a part of the broadcast. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Looking into the Maricopa County situation and the Assistant Attorney General, whose name is Jennifer Wright. We're spending a little bit of time following this particular story because Jennifer Wright sent a singeing letter to the Maricopa County election officials demanding that they answer questions and provide information. Alan says he has a home in Arizona. He says her name is Jennifer Wright. I don't know her political affiliation, but since she works under Attorney General Mark Brnovich, a Republican, I'm assuming she is also. I've never heard of her before this letter. Me neither. I have heard of Mark Brnovich, though. Let's see. On Monday, State Elections Director Corey Lorick provided the county board with certifications for the vote counting machines from the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. Lorick also warned the board the state would sue if they did not certify on time. Well, that might be the circumstance. They may just put up with that. County boards do not have legal rights to change the results provided by their election officials or refuse to certify them. Lorick wrote that if the certification was not received by the Secretary of State December 5th, the Cochise County votes will go uncounted. Okay, that would give a boost to Democrats up and down the ballot in tight state races, since some Republican candidates got as much as 60% of the vote in the county. Maricopa County had problems with 30% of its vote centers. Again, that's up for debate. County officials have repeatedly said all the ballots were counted. No one lost their ability to vote. Those with ballots that could not be read were told to place them in a secure box to be tabulated by more robust machines at election county headquarters. But from what I understand about that situation is that some were commingled with already tabulated ballots. This according to the letter from Jennifer Wright. By the way, Allen also reports that Maricopa County has some very diverse cities politically. Some lean more Democrat, a lot are mixed. Some, like Mesa, Surprise, Fountain Hills, lean far right. Yeah, so once again, this is a black eye for Arizona elections. They've got to fix this. Republican Attorney General Mark Brnovich, wants an explanation of how the printer problems happened before Maricopa County does its certification November 28th. The head of his elections integrity unit also wants to know how some of the uncounted ballots were mixed up at the polling sites, and an explanation for issues experienced by voters who left to go to another vote center with operating tabulators. Arizonans deserve a full report and accounting of the myriad problems that occurred in relation to Maricopa County administration of the 2022 general election. This according to Jennifer Wright. Maricopa County Board Chair Bill Gates said the county will respond with transparency as we have done throughout this election. The county said that about 17,000 election day ballots were involved and had to be counted later instead of at the polling place. Only 16% of the 1.56 million votes cast in Maricopa County were made in person on election day. Wow, 16%. Those are the only people that showed up? Man. In Mojave County, the board and chair of the county Republican Party praised their elections director, but Jeannie Kench joined GOP State Chair Kelly Ward in saying the Republicans were disenfranchised because of issues in Maricopa County. Now, once again, I'm not taking a side on any of this. All I'm trying to do is just get the results and want them to be fair and want the votes to count. And apparently some of these things are not there. And by the way, when we're talking about 17,000 votes, 17,000 votes is a big number, especially in a tight race. And we'll see. This is a 2020 redo, said one of the county boards. Her name is Hildy Angius. If we don't certify today, we're making a statement. We're just making a statement of solidarity. These other counties that are just standing up for the attorney general and requiring that Maricopa County answer these questions, they can certify at any time. And they will doubtless do that, saving themselves from a political mess that is generated by a lawsuit from the state to the counties. Ron Gould, a former state lawmaker, agreed that it was only a message. It's purely a political statement, but it's the only way we can make that statement. Once again, the Associated Press provided all that. Okay? Yep. Cannot find Jennifer Wright's party affiliation. I'm going to go with Ellen on this one. I think she's probably a Republican, and that's probably the way that is. I don't like mail-in ballots. I don't like mail-in balloting. I just don't. William Barr, the former Attorney General of the United States, said that mail-in balloting was rife for fraud. Now, I'm not saying there's any fraud going on, but it's clear that mail-in balloting is rife with fraud. And so when you hear people say, well, it's not enough to actually make a difference. Some of these races are within 500 votes of each other. How can any voter fraud be tolerated? I just don't understand any of that. Alan comes back with Mojave County is a far, far, far right county. Does that mean they're far right? They're in the northwest of Arizona. It is represented in Congress by Paul Gosar. Enough said. Well, okay. Like I said, all I'm trying to do is get to the bottom of the story. Somebody has to. I'll do it in case nobody else wants to. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked that this wasn't splattered all over the front page of every paper in the United States. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is the Wells Report. Less of a big deal, but still good. Back with more in just a moment. Okay, that's our number one in the books. Thanks very much, Ellen. I appreciate your help on that. Thank you to Langston. That was great. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly, truthfully, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. Regardless of where the bias comes from, bias in news is propaganda. We make commentary that is not news. Commentary is opinion, specifically mine, just as valuable as yours, and so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. So I need some help from the people watching. Would you do me a favor? Would you do me a favor and check on Facebook to make sure this thing is broadcasting? That would be very cool. If you would do that, I would appreciate it immensely. We were talking a little bit about what was going on in Maricopa County and in Arizona. The Assistant Attorney General there has sent a letter to Maricopa County election officials demanding that steps be taken and also questions be answered in time for the certification, the actual canvass, which is going to occur November 28th. We have a guy that spends part of his time there. He lives in Texas and in Arizona. His name is Aaron Alan Schaefer. And let's see. What do you see coming? Let's see. Oh, that's Pep is asking me a question about Governor Abbott and troops to the border. I have a few comments on that I'll get to here in a minute. Let's see. Boy, he was talking a little bit about the Assistant Attorney General Jennifer Wright. She apparently ran as a candidate for Phoenix mayor in 2011. She was talking a little bit about fraud in the 2020 election. Allen says those were unproven theories. Wright is viewed by some as partisan based on her social media. Wright, who is responsible for overseeing complaints made to the Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit. Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. By the way, if you want to know a little bit more about that, go to the last hour of the Wells Report. Check that out. It's all covered there. So there is an interesting situation afoot regarding the nation's railroads. The Biden administration was informed that there may be a problem with railroad labor, and indeed that there were strikes planned. And the president interceded and apparently brokered a deal. That brokered deal was announced as, there we go. Okay. That brokered deal has apparently fallen to pieces. A fourth U.S. railroad union has rejected the agreement with their employees brokered by the Biden administration, reigniting fears of a nationwide rail worker strike. This, according to a spokesperson for the rail companies. They claim that they're ready, willing, and able to reach new negotiations. We need to keep the network moving. We need to keep the economy moving. The Association of American Railroads president and CEO Ian Jeffries said on Varney and Company on Fox Business. He said that today. So that's why we stand ready, willing, and able to reach new voluntary agreements. Absent that, we believe Congress might need to be ready to step in, as it has historically, to solve this issue. Jeffrey's comments came just after a fourth rail union rejected a tentative agreement with the nation's major freight railroads, raising the prospects of a nationwide strike that could kneecap the economy in the middle of the holiday season. Members of the Transportation Division of the International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers, SMART TD, how witty, representing more than 28,000 workers, issued a split decision in the vote announced yesterday. Yardmasters representing SMART TD voted to ratify the contract. A smaller group of 1,300 rail and engine service members voted against their separate contract. The thing about this is that the labor rules on America's railroads are incredibly tight. The guys who are this 1,300 train and engine service members, the union that they are members of, and those employees have what is best described as draconian working conditions. In other words, they have to be on call. It's not like suddenly you can find yourself in a position where, zap, you are called in on a moment's notice. That's not exactly the way it works. They have a pretty good idea when they're going to have to work and so on and so on, but they can't take time off. They have to be available on the labor boards where they put their names up on these boards, and they just go through and grab the next person that's available. And if they're not available, they get fired. And these are good jobs. You know, the good union jobs that President Biden talks about on a regular basis. Yeah, those are some of the jobs he's talking about. All 12 unions involved in negotiations have to ratify their new agreements to avoid a potential work stoppage, which would decimate the already fragile supply chains in the middle of the Christmas shopping rush. While 8 of those unions already agreed to the deal, negotiated by the Presidential Emergency Board appointed by President Biden, a strike could happen as early as December 9th. Now, keep something in mind. If some of these smaller union groups go on strike, the bigger union groups won't cross picket lines, making it a much bigger strike. In October, the AAR estimated that the strike's disruption to the supply chain would cost the U.S. economy $2 billion every single day. Ian Jeffrey said, that's exactly why we need to do everything we can to avoid an economic crippling work stoppage that is in no one's interests whatsoever. Well, that's not exactly true, Mr. Jeffries. It's in the interest of the people that don't want to agree to this agreement. Not our employees' interests, not the carrier's interests, not our customers' interests. True. While the original agreement gave rail workers a 24% wage increase during a 5-year period and thousands of dollars in bonuses, some unions voiced concern about the lack of sick time off. The National Carriers Conference Committee stated, we have sick benefits. That's true, but to start claiming the benefits, you have to be off for 7 days. That's 7 days without pay, according to a Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. He recalled one worker took off 10 days because he had COVID-19, was paid $74 over that time. Many workers have to use vacation time in order to get paid for such absences, he said, and that's a sacrifice in their career field. It absolutely is. Can you imagine having to take vacation to go see your doctor? That's what these people have to deal with. Most guys spend over 230 days away from their families every year. Vacation is very important. My grandfather died. Instead of being with my family, I had to work and use vacation for his funeral. We do not hardly get any time whatsoever, or you have guys come in sick with COVID because they don't want to lose a paycheck. Jeffries noted that all rail companies are continuing to have discussions to identify paths forward with the 4 unions that have rejected the tentative deal. Our employees work 24/7, 365 and do an amazing job moving America's freight and doing so safely. These are tough jobs, and that's why they're so highly compensated, and they absolutely deserve the compensation that is included in these agreements, said Jeffries. That's why it's important we get the last few across the finish line so that our employees can get the compensation they've earned and they deserve for the hard work they do. Earlier this month, U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh told Fox Business he's encouraging that both sides are staying to the table, or he's encouraged that both sides are staying at the table, and expressed hopes there won't be a strike. I've encouraged both sides to stay at the table and get another try and another ratification vote out there before the deadline happens, noting that he is very engaged in ongoing talks, which he previously described as long and painful. This, by the way, is from Fox Business News. Jeffrey suggested all parties take a step back and evaluate where the negotiations are going on right now. We've had 8 of 12 unions, 9 of 13 contracts fully ratified, which means those employees and those unions are getting that immediate $16,000 pay raise and 24% over the terms of the contract, which will result in an average of $160,000 wages and benefits for the employees. So we're very pleased we've gotten this far. We do have some work to do with our final 4 unions, and we continue to have those discussions and try to identify a path forward. Make no mistake, if these guys go out on strike, this will be bad. This will be a bad thing, because it will absolutely screw up the economy. It'll screw up the the supply chain that we already have difficulties with. Prices will continue. Inflation will also continue. And this will be bad. And it will affect you. So this is not some small deal. Now, what I say about this, I've never worked for the railroad, but in Barstow, California, where I used to live, at one time the world's largest classification yard, we called it the hump yard, was built out there, and they take railroad cars in an amazing ballet of computer technology, and they sort these cars to their destinations and loads and so on and so forth, and they build trains in this classification yard. Then engines back up to them and take them wherever they have to go. And those jobs are handled by tough, hardy workers of both sexes, both genders. And I will tell you, it is just hard, tough work. And yes, they do make good money. But once again, because of vagaries in labor law and the way the agreements have been put out there, the problem is that you literally have to take vacation to go see the doctor. And that's not something that they need to do. These people are away from home a lot. And these vagaries are, like I said, draconian. For example, Los Angeles is approximately 130, 140 miles away from Barstow, California. A friend of mine, his job is based out of Los Angeles. His job based out of Los Angeles involves him leaving Barstow, driving across the high desert, over the Cajon Pass, through the Inland Empire to Los Angeles, to the railroad yards in LA to start his workday. That's about a 2.5-hour job or drive, unless you run into traffic, and then it's worse. So he has to leave many hours ahead so that he's not late. Because if he's late, well, he gets dinged. You get late too much, he gets fired. So he drives down there. Then he boards a train that goes, guess where? That's right, Barstow. In other words, he drives to LA to get on a train that goes right back to where he lives. And then he boards another train that goes back to Los Angeles. And then he drives back home to Barstow. He's been doing that for decades. It is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. But that's the way this works. Now, think about that just a little bit, especially when gas prices get over $4 a gallon. And he lives in California, so gas prices, gosh, they'd be really, really happy if they had gas prices that were only $4 a gallon. So these union agreements, they really haven't taken into consideration the things that are necessary. I suggested that James grab a train that was going down to Los Angeles and deadhead down there. And he said, well, yeah, but that train runs in the middle of the night, and I'd be sitting around on my tuchus for hours and hours before my shift started. Once again, and he burns up cars. I mean, that's a long trip. He's driving almost 300 miles a day. And when you start thinking about how tired you are after a full day's work, well, things get mighty burly, mighty fast. So hopefully, at some point, this will be taken care of. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. DB Photos has some comments regarding a possible rail strike. DB, have we talked before? He's on Twitch. I have an important job, don't have access to the benefits the railroad workers do. I accepted that when I took my job. Not a lot of sympathy, but a strike will come close to shutting down the economy. It will be bad. It will touch everyone. There is no doubt about it. DB also sent me a link, which unfortunately I can't access, but I'm hoping that other people who are on the chat room can. So there you go. So that's what's going on with that. Let's talk a little bit about the Colorado shooting at the at this LGBTQ bar, Club Q. A decorated former U.S. Army major is being credited with, he and one other person being credited with disarming the man that police say was intending a murderous rampage inside an LGBTQ nightclub there. Rich Fierro is the guy's name. I wasn't thinking. I just ran over there and got him. Yeah, he sure did, from what I understand. The thoughts ran through Fierro's mind quickly. I got to kill this guy. He's going to kill my kid. He's going to kill my wife. He ended up killing my daughter's boyfriend. Good heavens. Fierro is one of two men police are crediting with saving lives by subduing a 22-year-old gunman who went on a shooting rampage Saturday night at Club Q, a well-known gathering place for the LGBTQ community. The former soldier was there with his daughter, Cassie, her boyfriend, several other friends to see a drag show and celebrate a birthday. He said it was one of the group's most enjoyable nights until the shooting started. The guy came in shooting. I smelled the cordite. I saw the flash. I dove, shoved my buddy down. When I tried to get up, I saw the ACUs and his armor plates. The man was apparently wearing armor plates. I didn't know whether he was shooting yet. I saw that and saw people on the patio. I grabbed him by the back of his cheap armor thing and pulled him down. Fierro said that he and another young man pinned the shooter, later identified as Anderson Lee Aldrich, stripping a pistol and rifle away from him and then began to beat him. The other man who tackled the shooter was identified as Thomas James. I kept wailing on him. I told this dude in front of me, kick him in his head. When a performer who was there for the drag show ran by, Fierro told him to kick the gunman. The performer stuffed a high-heeled shoe in the attacker's face and also tried to subdue him. This is an important safety tip. Okay, if you're at a drag show, remember those stiletto heels, they're sharp. All right? So apparently he has this attacker has puncture wounds in his face, and I absolutely am sure that he earned every single one of them. So he moved on to say, I love them, he said, of the city's LGBT community. I have nothing but love. Good for him. After arriving on scene, police cuffed Fierro for about an hour, he said, detaining him in the back of a police car. Fierro said he doesn't hold it against Colorado Springs Police Department, saying they were just doing their jobs, trying to sort out what happened. Fierro repeatedly rejected the label of hero for his actions. I'm not a hero. I hope that people really want to be a hero get to go do that. I hope my daughter is a hero. I'm just some dude from San Diego trying to make it, said the two-time Bronze Star recipient and veteran of 3 combat tours. I used to tell my soldiers, let's go. Got to get on the next patrol. No one in the building is going to be able to get on the next patrol. They have to live with this until they're able to deal with this. I feel for every person in that room. He did express regret that he did not finish the shooter. The guy's still alive and my family is not. I tried to finish him. He's still in the hospital. I don't know where he's at. I don't care. Thank you, Major. God bless you. And you may not think you're a hero, but there are an awful lot of people there that are walking around because you were. Just one man's opinion. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us today. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Coming up in just a couple of seconds, a question I asked last week that may be answered today. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. There is breaking news out there, and I want you to hear about it. This happened about 40 minutes ago, something along that line. The White House is extending the pause on student loan payments until as late as June 30th, 2023. This will very likely end the program because the Republicans have control of the House of Representatives, and I just don't see them parting with that money. I just don't. His plan for a wider student loan forgiveness plan remains tied up in the courts. The pause had been scheduled to end December 31st, 2022, but that date was coupled with plans for mass debt relief. In a video message posted on Twitter, President Biden defended his plan for far-reaching student debt forgiveness and said the extension of the moratorium was a way to address the ongoing legal challenges. I'm confident our student debt relief plan is legal, but it's on hold until because Republican officials want to block it. Well, that's the nature of politics. If you want to make sure that your agenda is passed, win more elections, Mr. President. And that's the way this works. Now, what he's talking about, the moratorium is on people paying back their loans, which is not something that the president can actually do. He says he believes he has strong legal footing. I don't see where it is, and that's why it's all tied up in the courts at this point. The separation of powers is very clear. The House of Representatives doles out money. The president cannot do that. The student loan program, depending on who you talk to, is either $400 billion or more. That's a lot of money. And to do so without a vote of the people's representatives is a clear violation of the separation of powers. I expect that the courts are going to find that direction. But that is one of the breaking stories. The other breaking story is more tragic. Let's see. News. Helicopter. Yeah. So one of the things that I used to do while I was doing radio, I was between jobs and ended up being a helicopter reporter for News 13 inside Las Vegas. I flew over 150 missions, and it was heart squeezing, especially when big events happened in Las Vegas, because you really don't know Las Vegas, but Las Vegas essentially has the Strip, which goes north and south and expands both directions as more casinos are built, and then gets to Las Vegas proper at the north end of the Strip. That's where Las Vegas is. The Strip is not Las Vegas. That's Clark County. Then what ends up happening is that what people really like to do is they like to fly in their private airplanes and fly down the Strip. Well, that's where News 13's helicopter was flying. And I got to be honest with you, when that was happening, there are different altitudes for different kinds of aircraft. Helicopters usually hover around 500 to 1,500 feet, and the low end of the spectrum is 1,500 feet. And so there would be times when there were so many aircraft over there, and you really had to worry about a midair collision. Also, these very tall construction cranes that they use to build these buildings, we flew past one, missed it by about maybe 20 feet that direction and about 5 feet that direction. We flew over the head of that crane, and it wasn't lit, which was a violation of FAA laws, and somebody ended up probably losing that contract. And that was we were flying along, everything was fine, and then the pilot at the time, which was the great Chief Ron Littleton, managed to miss the crane, or I wouldn't be sitting here right now. In North Carolina, however, a news helicopter did crash. It happened in Charlotte, North Carolina. It happened this afternoon. The Robinson R-44 crashed near Interstate I-77 and Nations Ford Road at about 12:20, is according to the FAA. The helicopter belonged to local CBS news station WBTV, according to a statement released by the station. The WBTV family is grieving a terrible loss, meteorologist Jason Myers and pilot Chip Tyag. lost their lives. We are working to comfort their families in this difficult time. Both Myers and Tyag, the only two people aboard the aircraft, were confirmed dead by the Mecklenburg EMS agency. WBTV says Myers grew up in North Carolina, worked in Texas and Virginia before returning to the Charlotte area. He leaves behind a wife and 4 children. Tyag, who had been a pilot for more than 20 years, joined WBTV in 2017. No vehicles on the highway were involved in the accident, according to police. Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department Chief Johnny Jennings said in a news conference this afternoon the pilot of the helicopter was a hero for avoiding incoming cars while trying to land. It seems the pilot was operating the aircraft, made some diversionary moves to avoid hitting traffic. And if that is truly the case, then that pilot is a hero, too, in my eyes. Make sure that the safety and security of those who are driving on the road were not in jeopardy. All of I-77 southbound was closed at this time near Nations Ford Road, will remain closed for an extended period of time, according to police. The ramps are closed from I-85 north to I-77 south. Police are working to open 2 lanes of traffic on I-77 as soon as possible. Tragic, terrible, awful. That hits home. I remember my last mission. I think I had 152 or 153. It's a big deal when you fly 100. I got a 100 mission patch and a pin, which I have to this day. And I remember getting out of that aircraft for the last time and breathing a huge sigh of relief that I had made it. Helicopters are fascinating aircraft. They're fun to fly in, but they're as dangerous as hell. They just are. And you can't really replace one of those aircraft with, say, for example, a fixed wing aircraft in that particular airspace that I'm talking about. If you have trouble with a fixed wing aircraft, it's really pretty easy to get to an airport runway, even with no power. But a helicopter is a little bit different. They can auto gyrate, but the radius of action that you have when your engine quits or something along that line, and that appears to be what happened with this Robbie's R44. When the engine quits, you can the rotors, if you dive the aircraft, the rotors will continue to spin and provide lift. And essentially what you do is you dive to the ground, and as you get there, you flare, and the momentum of the rotors will give you enough lift to be able to land. It's usually a rough landing, but you land okay. In a Robbie's, that's a very small helicopter. And those rotors are not nearly as heavy as, say, for example, the aircraft that I flew in, which was a Bell Jet Ranger. Those rotors will spin a very long time without having the aerodynamic forces of a shallow dive keeping them spinning. And as a matter of fact, the problem with that is not that they will spin too slowly, it's that they'll spin too fast. An overspeed on a helicopter is equally disastrous. But in a Robbie's, you have to make those angles a lot more acute. In other words, you have to fly, you have to take a pretty deep dive. And remember, the amount of altitude you have is relatively limited. Helicopters fly between 500 and 1,500 feet. So that's not a lot of room. That's about 500 yards that's 5 football fields at the high end and a little more than a football field and a half at the low end. And so you can control the helicopter as time goes by because the tail rotor continues to spin and the rotors continue to spin. And it is not unlikely at all that a pilot, certainly of a guy with Mr. Tyag's experience, would not be able to avoid obstacles, including cars. And it is tragic and it is awful that those 2 men are gone. And God bless their families in this moment of grief. Yeah. Yes, the St. Patrick Mission Patch. It's in very secure storage. Thank you. I appreciate it. My buddy is a helicopter pilot and they practice auto rotation. They do. I never got to practice an auto rotation. All I got to do was practice how to land the helicopter if we lost the pilot. And while I can fly a helicopter, there are some very funny stories that aren't appropriate at this moment. But helicopters are finicky. They are very complex. Just one quick story. It's kind of an aside. I don't want to digress, but you have one drive shaft in your car. In a Bell Jet Ranger, there are 4, and they are all connected through universal joints. That's 4 points of failure. Then it goes back to a transmission that goes to the tail rotor. That's 5 points of failure. And as Ron Littleton used to tell me, if the tail rotor fails, we will land. It may not necessarily be a controlled landing, but you will land because gravity is tenacious. And then there are other things that can happen. You can lose an engine and be powerless, and the control surfaces are very complex. They build all kinds of redundancies, especially in Arabis. And yeah, it's tough. A few years ago, there was amazingly bad, severe weather in our town, in the DFW area. And one of the news helicopters took to the air, flying through all of those storm fragments, and got some video of a tornado actually running through a storage yard for semi-tractor trailers. And they were pulled 200 feet in the air and spun like cartwheels after the tornado went through this yard, and they got video of it. It was one of the bravest things I ever saw anybody do in a helicopter or anything else. It was truly amazing. A lot of people said maybe foolhardy. But yeah, Gary points out the KVIL helicopter took a hard landing a few years ago. And yes, watched an assembly of one of the boom cranes. None of those things look stable. Well, they are stable, but they're stable enough so that if your helicopter hits it, the crane will not move, especially the crane head. It will just stay there while your helicopter essentially wraps itself around it. And so that is one of the things you have to deal with. Let's see. Remember the Care Flight helicopter that nearly fell off a hospital? I remember seeing a video of one that did. The wind blew it right. Because once again, when you're landing on skyscrapers, the wind just blows these things hither, thither, and yon. Tornado went through one of my dad's RV dealer's lots and wrecked a bunch of units. Millions in inventory completely trashed. Yeah. The atmosphere is tough. It's unforgiving. And although we do try to live inside that atmosphere, it's a tenuous task. And that people lose their lives is part and parcel of these things. I remember the loss of Jane Dornacher, which is actually her name. She died in San Francisco. And it was sad. It stopped the entire radio industry. She was an ebullient, beautiful spirit. And she was so funny, and she was so good. Very much like this meteorologist and this helicopter pilot, because there's a joy in facing that danger together. It's a very small little place. Helicopters may look a lot bigger than they are because you really don't get a feeling for how big they are, but you're sitting very close to each other. And if you fly like I did, 153, 154 missions, you become close friends. There was a time when we were flying back from an extended flight where we were dispatched to go get some video of something that happened in far north Las Vegas. It was way down the road. And on the way back, we saw what was left of a pickup truck that had run off the road. Apparently the guy who was driving fell asleep. And we flew over that and saw 4 yellow blankets arrayed on the ground in the median. They went into the median and hit a drainage system, and they were gone. And everybody in the helicopter, after we shot the video, was silent. And then the pilot at that time, Ernie Tiska, looked at me and said, you know, those guys just a few minutes ago were headed to Las Vegas for the time of their lives. And they never made it. Those kinds of things change you. And these, of course, these deaths will change everyone who knew them. So God bless them all. God bless the memories and the souls of those departed. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The Mayan civilization sort of kind of vanished, but they were tough people. They had a version of basketball where these guys took a pelota and they had a stone goal, and the first team to get a goal won the game. Just one goal. The other team was then summarily slaughtered. So there you go. Teamwork. The Mayans are tough. They were tough. They left behind some unbelievable structures. One of them is called El Castillo now. It is the Pyramid of Kukulkan. It's in the Mexican state of Yucatan. It has been closed since 2008. You used to be able to climb to the top of it. You don't get to do that anymore, but one woman, unnamed, decided to climb the pyramid, and while she was up there being jeered by people below, started dancing. Yeah. First, they started chanting, "Jail, jail, jail," and "Lock her up." She was pelted with water bottles as she left and made her way through the mob. And then what happened in the video shared with local media, it's been viewed more than 4 million times. The tourist appears to be asked to come down by a man who has climbed some of the steps. As she made her way down, footage shows her dancing and waving her hat at the crowd below, which is not the right thing to do. At the bottom, the onlookers gather around her. They can be seen shouting as she tried to get past. Her hat was knocked out of place by the mob. Various people threw water from plastic bottles. People are videoing the scene with their mobile phones. The tourist was able to move away from the crowd, accompanied by security staff of the archaeological site. The National Institute of Anthropology and History issued a statement a few hours after the video was released, noting the monument had not been damaged. Fines for climbing the temple can range from $2,569 to $5,138, depending on the damage caused to the structure. According to the Latin American news outlet Merco Press, the authorities have yet to report the incident formally. Good. I'm glad this was the outcome. People were really disrespectful. A few things more embarrassing than entitled tourists. Chichen Itzá is UNESCO World Heritage Site spanning back more than 1,000 years and drawing more than 2.5 million people annually. Now, the thing about that is that, like I said, the Mayans were tough. And apparently there were people that suggested that she be maybe the last ever human sacrifice in that particular pyramid, which is what the pyramid was for. So like I said, not a good thing to do. You know, you just don't desecrate what are truly sacred structures. You just don't do it. Yeah. But it's strange that people would call for human sacrifice. That's something you just don't hear every day. You just don't hear every day at all. It's amazing. Yeah. I've always wanted to go there. I also want to go to Machu Picchu. I have not been able to go to Machu Picchu yet. I want to go because that's another amazing place. And so on. But this this woman was truly screwing things up. And it's going to be very expensive. That little jaunt up that pyramid is going to be a very, very expensive thing. And it should be. It should be. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I hope you're having a wonderful preparation for your turkey day. There is a thawing turkey on in my refrigerator at this particular moment. We're looking forward to having that because Susan makes brilliant turkey. It's really, really good. And I don't know exactly how she's going to do it this year. She changes. I'm not a big believer of the deep fat fried turkey. That was something that was really popular a few years ago here in Texas. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow on the pre-Thanksgiving special edition of the Wells Report. But smoked turkey around here is really good. And, oh, by the way, it's really, really good. There was somebody that was talking to us yesterday. He said he was going to have barbecue. And that brings something up that I think is important. In our house, when I was growing up, we would have Thanksgiving, turkey, dressing, the trimmings, really kind of cool. And then we'd have a Christmas banquet as well. Turkey, stuffing, trimmings. And while I enjoy turkey, especially the turkey sandwiches afterwards, you know, the turkey sandwiches with Miracle Whip and mustard and some onion and a beer. Oh my. Having the two of those meals so in close proximity is tiresome. And one of these days, and I'll tell the story tomorrow of the gelatinous turkey carcass. That's another story entirely. But all I can tell you is that I am a big believer in people not having traditional Thanksgiving dinners. You know, as long as they're having a good one, I really don't care what they eat. But we'll talk more about that tomorrow on the special pre-Thanksgiving version of the Wells Report. This is hour number 2 in the books. We'll put hour number 3 together in just a moment. Thanks for being with us today. All right. Very cool so far. Back in just a teeny tiny little bit. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We report the news honestly, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We attempt to de-propagandize the news, and that's the hardest job I have. We make commentary, which is not the news. No, that is just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It is the Wells Report. A couple of ways for you to join the conversation. You can hit the chat room, which is available on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. We've had people from all of those platforms join us. Oh, there you go. People are talking about their Thanksgivings. We'll have the special Thanksgiving Eve edition of the Wells Report tomorrow, and then I'll be taking a few days off. Various people, and make sure that you remember all of these comments because I want to hear them again tomorrow, because we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on the special edition of the Wells Report. We're going to have a good time. We've been asking last week. I asked some of the Democrats who listen to this broadcast, and by the way, thanks very much for listening. I know I was talking to a Democrat friend of mine yesterday, or day before yesterday. And she said that being a Democrat, she was a lifelong Democrat, it was hard to hear me discuss some of the things I discuss. But she listened anyway, because she wanted to hear what the other side would be thinking that I was a Republican, which I'm not. I was a Republican. I was disgusted with the Bill Frist Republican Party that was in power between 2004 and 2006. I had voted for Social Security reform. I had voted for tax reform with George W. Bush twice and never saw it. I was disgusted. So the Republican Party, when given power, do nothing with it. That happened again during the Trump administration from 2018 through 2020, when once again they had the opportunity to do a lot of things that I had voted for and blew it again. And so I finished my association with the Republican Party once and for all, and I am now a constitutional conservative. And I hope for at some point, and maybe it'll be the 2024 election, if indeed the Republican Party sees fit to continue screwing up with regards to a guy who got 74 million votes last time he ran for office. If they continue doing that, I suspect that Donald Trump's next move would be to run as a conservative, which I hope he does. He made a valiant attempt at trying to bring the Republican Party into reality and has been punished for it ever since. And so once again, doesn't make any difference, Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't make any difference. But the interesting thing about it is lots of Democrats listen to this show. And I appreciate it. I do. Because this isn't about the greater glory of the Republican Party, which they don't possess much of. Arguably, the ulterior nature of the Republican Party standing off and essentially facilitating Democrat priority items is equally frustrating insofar as I disagree with many of those Democrat Party things because I haven't seen the government do anything right yet. And so, although their responses to the obvious things that the federal government should be responsible for, the response to 2001, the 9/11 attacks, which gave birth to this broadcast, they made good moves, and then they made lousy moves, and other lousy moves were made by the other party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the federal government is a mess, which is why they have such low approval ratings among the American people. And they should have them. Because the American government needs to start working to the benefit, in my humble opinion, once again, opinion cam. The government of the United States needs to work to the advantage and to the benefit of the American people, as opposed to the benefit of far-flung countries. Somehow we just justified billions of dollars to be sent to emerging countries, whatever those are, for the terrible damage we've done to the climate just by being a country with technology and industry and all of those things. Meanwhile, Red China is not going to have to pay anything, but the American people are going to spend billions of dollars on these countries that are run by socialist governments where all that money goes into the pockets of the people running the government, and nothing will be done to control the weather in any of these countries, but we will pay for it. Arg. And that is not to the benefit of the American people. The American people deserve that money. The American people deserve a better federal government. And it's a hard nut to crack, as we've just discovered with the 2022 election. Not that turning power over to the Republicans is going to help much. I doubt that it will. I hear brave noises. And once again, I am reminded of a Shakespeare quote, which is smoke and fury signifying nothing. Until I see something from the Republican Party, I will remain being dubious and skeptical. And I hope you will be as well. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I asked last week who a good Democrat presidential candidate would be for 2024. Apparently, this was heard by Fox News. And so Harris Alec has written an article with a headline, "Who would be the Democrat presidential nominee in 2024 if 80-year-old Biden bows out?" He became the oldest serving president in American history when he turned 80 on Sunday. And here is what the article from Fox News talks about. President Biden became the oldest serving president when he turned 80. That's a feat that has some wondering whether an octogenarian commander-in-chief should seek re-election in 2024. No one in the United States, well, okay, 2/3 of the people of the United States, of both parties, don't want him to run. But he keeps talking about it, and that's understandable because the moment he says he's not going to run, he becomes a lame duck president, and he doesn't want to do that. Although now that the Republicans have control of the House of Representatives, that option is much more viable. President Biden has publicly expressed his ambition to run for a second term. At least one Democrat strategist said the president should make good on his promise to be a bridge to the next generation of center-left leaders. Quote, "The best thing would be for President Biden to call it a day sooner rather than later, so we can be a party of the next generation, not the expiring generation," said Colin Strother. He's a Democrat political strategist. The quote continues, "House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is gone. Mitch McConnell has established he's way behind the times." Truer words never spoken. "And there are legitimate concerns about someone the president's age being able to do this very tough job well. Many similar opinions have been cast regarding President Trump. He is equally old. We will see. Not quite equally, but close." Here are some of the top options. So what I did was I said, who's going to run for the Democrat nomination in 2024? Let's assume that Joe Biden actually will do that. So they've made a list of the people that could have a shot at it. At the top of that list is Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris is President Biden's second in command, is seen as a logical choice for Democrats. The former California senator, she's 58 years old, the first female vice president in the history of the United States. She's also the first African American and first Asian American to hold the role. During the 2022 midterms, Harris was a top political surrogate for Democrats after her presidential aspirations in 2020 evaporated. She's also represented the White House at various global summits. Despite her resume, Harris's 2020 presidential campaign ended before the primaries even took place. Harris is also a polarizing figure for Republicans because of her responsibility in overseeing the surging migrant crisis on the U.S.-Mexico border. Complicating matters is that Harris's job approval rating is even lower than Biden's. This according to the Los Angeles Times, that noted right-wing paper of record for Los Angeles. She would have both the burden and blessings of the Biden administration, said Mike Madrid, a consultant who advises both parties and helped found the Never Trump Lincoln Project. But as vice president, you get all the downside without being able to take credit for the accomplishments. The next person that they have listed is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. The transportation secretary was one of the most sought-after surrogates for the National Democrat Party during the recently passed midterms. Buttigieg is also responsible in his official capacity for doling out money from the administration's $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package. The dual roles have served to raise Buttigieg's profile after his own 2020 presidential bid fizzled out after winning the Iowa caucuses. Though Buttigieg has denied talk of another White House run, his political action committee has resurfaced in recent months to endorse candidates for state and federal offices this cycle. His candidacy would face serious obstacles. The transportation secretary is likely to face a GOP congressional investigation next year over how the infrastructure money has been spent. Republicans are also eager to look into Buttigieg's efforts at mitigating a national rail strike and shoring up supply chain problems. The transportation secretary has faced criticism for taking parental leave last year, while the White House was trying to secure passage of the infrastructure law dealing with the supply chain crisis. Senator Bernie Sanders is also on this list. He's older than Biden. He's 81 years old. He kept his political operation going after having made 2 unsuccessful White House bids. He is a Democrat socialist from Vermont. He was active on the campaign trail in 2022 and has a new book geared toward younger voters. While few expect Sanders to make another presidential run, the lawmaker has a deep base of support within the left wing of the Democrat Party. That would be the socialist communist wing. Those grassroots supporters helped propel Sanders to several upsets in his 2016 and 2020 campaigns. It also provided the senator with fundraising efforts needed to mount another campaign should he choose to do so. Representative Ro Khanna. He's a California Democrat, been traveling the country in recent months, touting his book on dignity in the digital age. He's even put consultants onto his payroll within the early 2024 Democrat nominating contests. While the lawmaker has ruled out running against Biden, he's made no effort to hide his interest in a White House run in the future. Khanna is little known outside California, however, although not a bad guy, at least from a standpoint of he is not a political sociopath, at least as far as I can tell. Then there are Democrat governors, one from California, one from Michigan. Those would be Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She won re-election this month by more than 10 percentage points. She got a spirited challenge from Republicans. Whitmer also has strong ties to labor unions, a core group that was instrumental in Biden's campaign for the 2020 Democrat nomination. Outside the Midwest, California Governor Gavin Newsom is seen as a potential White House aspirant. Newsom, like Whitmer, was just reelected by a large margin to a second term. He's also been active in needling red state governors over abortion policy. The governor has spent money in Florida and Indiana, pitching businesses to move to California if they oppose new restrictions on abortion. I can say that businesses moving to California would have no problem finding office space, insofar as lots of businesses have moved out of California because of Governor Gavin Newsom and his policies. I'm not sure that Gavin Newsom is a serious candidate, but we will talk a little bit about these candidates, and we'll chat a little bit more about that. My name is John David Wells. This is the Wells Report. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. By all means, give me a buzz if you have something to say. Who do you think would be a better candidate for the Democrat Party in 2024 if the name of the person you're thinking of wasn't on the list? Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-279-3. I'm sorry, I was distracted by somebody's very funny comment. 817-379-2172. So we just went through a listing of possible Democrat candidates for the presidency in 2024. And going to go over those very quickly, then get to the chat room. The first on the list was Vice President Kamala Harris. She has no chance. Absolutely no chance. She is not a serious candidate for anything. And that's just the case. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is a darling of the left, bereft of real governance credentials. Being the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, does not qualify you for the presidency, nor does being the transportation secretary. And Mr. Buttigieg is a guy who bases everything through a lens of personal life and experience. And you have to look beyond that. He's not old enough to be able to realize how important that is. Right now, he's living his life, and I wish him good success. But again, not a serious candidate for the presidency. Senator Bernie Sanders represents a deadly virus to the Democrat Party. He is a socialist. Not only is he a socialist, he's also a hypocrite, having never lived in a socialist country. He espouses the principles of socialism, but has never actually had to endure them. He doesn't have a chance either. Sooner or later, the Democrat Party will wake up to the fact that those guys are absolutely destroying their party. Ro Khanna, on the other hand, Ro Khanna is a more center-left person, even though he is from California. He is a guy who sees the forest for the trees, and I don't consider him to be a political sociopath. That may change if he actually starts running for the presidency. I hope that he's in that particular mix because I think his voice ought to be heard, because he represents what I consider to be, although I'm still iffy on this, the real Democrat Party as opposed to the progressive socialist one. Governor Gavin Newsom, no way. Absolutely no chance. Gavin Newsom is essentially a narcissistic joke. And once again, this is just my opinion. All of this is my opinion, even though I'm looking at the wrong camera, but here's the article, and that's what I'm referencing. All I can tell you is that Gavin Newsom is, he's one of those guys that is all about himself. And that's all. He's also a hypocrite in that he would tell people to stay home and he would close restaurants except for the one that he was going to have dinner at tonight. And him showing up famously fubbing during the dinner. In other words, that's a cross between looking at your phone and snubbing, fubbing. He was fubbing when somebody took a picture and it went nationwide. Governor Newsom has no chance. Gretchen Whitmer is one of those persons who looks politically sociopathic to me, but she did have a pretty good election in Michigan, and with her ties to the labor unions, could be serious. And that's about it. Once again, I kept putting up the idea that that Michelle Obama would be somebody that the Democrat Party ought to at least talk to. I don't know. Let's see. Mark says, I saw a black political commentator state the Democrat Party could not bypass Harris after putting her up as VP. Said they would lose the black vote, specifically black females. That could be true. Jess says, cue the frozen Bernie memes. Yeah, that's true. By the way, Jesse said, dear Lord God, help us. No Kamala. Please, God, no. Okay. And then she moves on to say, no Californians, please. Yeah. And then Mark Greer says, going back to our previous discussion, the Democrats would be able to hold the black vote, certainly if Michelle Obama won, but many people say that's never going to happen. All I can reply to that is, we will see, won't we? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. As many of you know, and those people who don't know that are new to the broadcast, I am a proud Texas State Guardsman. Whenever I discuss the border, however, I make it abundantly clear that I am not a spokesperson for the Texas State Guard, nor the organization that the Texas State Guard is a part of, which is the Texas Military Department. I am simply speaking as a private citizen, and I want to make it abundantly clear that that is the case. That being said, I have served on the border of Texas and Mexico for nearly a year, and I have seen with my own eyes the corruption and the depravity and the danger that is apparent with that border. It's wide open. It's chaos. As a private citizen, I will tell you that the work being done by the Texas Military Department is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Governor Greg Abbott, after a very successful run to be reelected, did indeed make some statements regarding his next steps on that border, and will that affect this reporter as a proud soldier in the Texas military department? Is possible. I'll let you know. That being said, Secretary Mayorkas, he is the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. He's in big trouble. The Republican Party has, for all intents and purposes, said you may resign or be impeached. You make a choice. This came out of a press conference earlier today with Kevin McCarthy and noted Republicans who went down there to see this firsthand after obtaining control of the United States House of Representatives. Here is some of that press conference with soon-to-be Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm down here for a couple different reasons. The first, to keep my promise. I've been to the border numerous times. I've been to El Paso. I came here in March 2021. We've watched, after the Biden administration took office, changing the policies, creating a real challenge for our border agents. I promised them if we won the majority, we'd make sure that we did everything we could to secure this border. I wanted to keep that promise and come back and spend time with them today. You know, just in the last 2 years, I've been to the border numerous times, but I've been to El Paso more than President Biden has been to the border any place in his 40 years of elected office. I think it'd be important for him to come see what his policies are doing and the damage that it's doing to our country. You know, it's an honor to be here with the agents. We just spent time with them. Our nation has never been so at risk, and their job has never been harder. Those brave men and women risk their lives every day to protect the American citizens from the consequences of illegal border crossings. Together, we bear witness to the worst border crisis in the U.S. history. There has been more than 4 million illegal border crossings since Joe Biden has taken office. That's not the worst part. Now that Title 42 may end, we're bracing for a tsunami. People talk about 18,000 crossings in a day. That would mean 13 million more illegal crossings for the rest of the term of Joe Biden if nothing changes. Think about that. 17 million more illegal entries into our country. Just last week, Secretary Mayorkas testified under oath that, yes, the border is secure. I'm here to tell you it is not. We spent the day with border agents. I asked each and every one if this border is secure. They laughed. They said it is not. It is one of the worst points in the history of this nation. We just went to a bridge in El Paso where 70,000 people have come across in the last 7 weeks. And the Secretary of Homeland thinks this border is secure. For the last 2 years, President Joe Biden and the Democrats running Congress has pushed open border policies and waged baseless attacks on our border agents. The actions of this administration have empowered cartels, drug smugglers, human traffickers, and terrorist organizations all around the world. Just last week, U.S. Customs and Border agents off the coast of Puerto Rico came under fire in the line of duty. One agent was fatally shot, while 2 other agents were wounded. In March 2021, we came down after the new administration had lifted those policies. We visited the border. I warned, having learned from the Border Patrol agents, of the suspects on the terrorist watch list that were coming across. The amount of fentanyl that they hadn't seen in the past now coming across. We held a press conference. We advised not just America, but to the members of Congress. Members of the Democratic Congress said I was lying, that there weren't people on the terrorist watch list. Congressman Gallegos said that, who sits on armed services. Since that time period, more than 107 terrorist suspects have been apprehended crossing this border. Fentanyl is poisoning and killing Americans in every single community. Americans have died from overdoses. Secretary Mayorkas would like you to believe that the people committing these crimes are just in the search of a better life. How many people have not been caught? In 42 days, the United Republican House takes control. In 42 days, we end one-party Democrat rule in Washington. A new House Republicans will work to stop Joe Biden's assault on our laws, our borders, and our border agents. We will use the power of the purse and the power of the subpoena. Now, let me be clear. Those responsible for this disaster will be held accountable. I've spoken today, again, Congressman Jim Jordan, and Jamie Comer, the future chair of Oversight and Judiciary Committee. And they have my complete support to investigate the collapse of our border and the shutdown of ICE enforcement nationwide. Under Secretary Mayorkas, his deliberate suspensions of our laws have proved deadly. Fentanyl is now flowing in record amounts. Today, 300 Americans will be poisoned and die. Tomorrow, 300 more. It is the equivalent of an airline crashing each and every day in America. But again, he does nothing. If an airline crashed 3 days in a row, the entire nation would say, we have a real challenge. We have a crisis. We have a disaster. We have to do something about it. But he continues to lie to the American public. We have lost operational control of our southern border, empowering drug cartels and human traffickers. They have fired shots at our National Guard. They put AK-47s pointing at helicopters. They have burned and hung and raped the women and caught them on fire. And again, Secretary Mayorkas thinks the border is secure. He has blocked ICE and Border Patrol from enforcing our laws while vilifying them at the same time. Do you realize what that has done? In the last 10 days, 3 Border Patrol agents have committed suicide, a total of 14 this year, a number we have not seen in decades. He ended the Remain in Mexico policy and wants to end Title 42. His actions have produced the greatest wave of illegal immigration in recorded history. Our country may never recover from Secretary Mayorkas' dereliction of duty. This is why today I am calling on the Secretary to resign. He cannot and must not remain in that position. If Secretary Mayorkas does not resign, House Republicans will investigate every order, every action, and every failure will determine whether we can begin impeachment inquiry. If Secretary Mayorkas was in charge of any company, he would have been fired by now for the failures of what he has caused. The American public deserve more, deserve better, and expect more within their government. Enough is enough. We will do whatever it takes. This is my commitment to the men and women of the Border Patrol and to the citizens of the United States of America. With that, I'd like to introduce Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who represents this area, represents more than 40% of the entire border, and was recently reelected by more than 14%. But what he has done is brought more members down to the border to educate them. And after January 3rd, no longer will members have to come down to the border to tour. We will hold our hearings at the border so the Democrats can no longer hide from the crisis they have created. I bring you Tony Gonzalez.
Amen. Thank you, future Speaker McCarthy. You know, I've hosted 16 delegations at the border. I've hosted Kevin McCarthy 3 times. And what you see is change is coming. And change is going to be led by the people standing right here. It's Thanksgiving week. People are doing a lot of different things. And what are House Republicans doing? We're going to the epicenter of the border crisis, and we're highlighting 2 things. One, highlighting the men and women in green that are rolling up their sleeves and fighting every day for this country to keep it safe. 2, we're highlighting the failures of this administration. On Thanksgiving week, we have to be thankful for a lot of things. Kevin McCarthy mentioned the suicides, 14 suicides. This is historic. It's no longer migrants that are dying at the border, it's Americans. And those Americans are wearing green uniforms. Rocky Seriano, here in El Paso, recently committed suicide. This is an epidemic. This should get us all united. You know, tomorrow is going to be the 6-month anniversary of Uvalde. And what people don't realize is Uvalde went into lockdown. The schools in Uvalde went into lockdown 48 times before that school violence occurred. 48 times. Guess what? I see that same occurrence happening all over the district. Change is coming. That day, a week later, I hosted the President of the United States. And I pulled him aside and I said, Mr. President, now isn't the time, but I would like to visit with you in the White House to see how Republicans and Democrats can work together to secure this border. My staff has called the White House every week since then. I urge the Biden administration, please work with the House Republican leadership to secure this border because lives are on the line. You know, these 16 border trips, they've been to talk about security. You know what we're not talking about, which I wish we would? Commerce and trade. Guess what? There's so much more that El Paso has to offer the world. Reshoring, you know, taking stuff from that's happening in China, reshoring it to the United States and our partners in Mexico. We don't have those discussions. Why? Because our border is wide open and people are dying every single day.
You are listening to Representative Tony Gonzalez. He's a Republican from the 23rd District, San Antonio, Del Rio, and Socorro. I've spent time in Del Rio personally. Everything he says is absolutely true. And when he starts talking about Customs and Border Patrol agents taking their own lives, one of them was my friend. Sergeant First Class Lozano was tall and handsome and effective, brilliant, committed, and he took his own life. Was it because of Border Patrol policy? Was it because of the political mess that's down there? It's possible. It's possible. But what I will tell you is that enough is enough. What's soon to be Speaker McCarthy was talking about regarding the death toll from fentanyl is not something that can be hidden from. I sat at this microphone and I said, close this border now. Close it. It is my hope that Governor Greg Abbott does that very thing. It is my hope that he does close the Texas-Mexico border. It is beyond essential that we do so. Fentanyl, and I am not the only one who has said it. I may have been the first one to say it, but I'm not the only one. We've had a biological attack from China. We now have fentanyl coming from China. That is a chemical attack. The third of that triad is nuclear. We're going to play around with these people until they try that too. It's time for us to close our border. And I certainly hope that that happens very soon. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. By the way, Gary, you're not the only one that believes that, just so you know. There are an awful lot of cartels that would make excellent targets. But we're not there yet. First thing we can do in this great United States is close our border. And we must. We absolutely must. It is my hope that Republican leadership will be joined by Democrat leadership in declaring drug cartels terrorist organizations. They operate as terrorist organizations. They are terrorist organizations. I've seen it for myself. And I will tell you that it's time to stop. It's time to stop this. Were it up to me, I would close the entire border immediately, except for the international ports of entry. And I would continue the very serious and strict inspections of everything coming into the United States. And the people that brought in drugs would never, ever leave. In other words, they would be prosecuted and they would spend the rest of their lives in prison, especially if it's fentanyl or heroin or cocaine or any of these other drugs that kill people. Those people who sanitize themselves by saying, well, I just use the occasional marijuana, it's not that big a deal. It may not be that big a deal in the United States, but you should see what happens to people that run across the cartels regarding marijuana south of this border. I have pictures in my mind I will never be able to forget. Never. I was talking to somebody who was asking me not to consider going back down to the border. And she said that the reason that she doesn't want me to go back down to the border is because it hurt me. It did. It did. It's hard to wrap your mind around the depravity that is part and parcel of everything that happens in that region of the world. And all I can say is that I will do what I should do as a proud member of the Texas Military Department. If I'm ordered to go, I will go. Because that's the job. And I'm not running and gunning with the National Guard. I'm supporting their very beautifully humane and brilliant operations. I am. But all I can say is that this is far worse than if you have not experienced it yourself. If all you know about the border of Texas, Mexico, Arizona, Mexico, and California, Mexico, if all you know is what you've seen on newscasts, you are missing 3/4 of the story. What happens down there is inhuman. It is savagery. And it is that way because it's making money. It makes money because these people circumvent the border. They must stop. They must stop being able to do that. How many more Americans have to die because they think they're taking an Adderall when actually what they're taking is a suicide pill? Because that's how they disguise them. How many more Americans have to die? 300 every single day? If losing 300 Americans, I'm sorry, in 10 days, that's the death toll from 9/11. Now, maybe I'm nuts, but when 3,000 Americans died in 9/11, I changed my entire life. I changed everything about my professional life because of 9/11. Every 10 days, we have another one. There is no excuse. There are times when political policy making and political policy execution and so on and so forth is maddening and it's annoying and so on and so on. But there are times when it is murderous, sociopathic, evil. And I don't care what your political party is, your default setting needs to be contact your policymaker, your representative in the United States. And I don't care where you live in the United States, because believe me, everybody listening to this broadcast, no matter what part of the country it's in, or no matter what country it's in, We all have a dog in this fight. We have got to close that border. Demand that they do so. We can sort it out from there. But step one is close the southern border of the United States of America. We have got to stop this slaughter. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a moment. That was the end of the show. Oops. Oops. Whoopsie. Whoops. Whoops. Let's see. All right. That's all I have. I'm sorry. I screwed that up. I thought I had one more segment, but I was wrong. God bless you all. Be ready with your Thanksgiving stories tomorrow. Alan, thanks for joining us. Alan, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate your contributions. Yeah, well, drug seizure statistics, fiscal year 2023, do not include the unbelievable number of mules carrying all manner of drugs across the border that don't get stopped at checkpoints. Okay? You don't know what you're talking about. I appreciate your contributions, but you are completely wrong on this one. Like I said, you don't know what you're saying. And I'm not arguing with you from a political standpoint. I'm telling you what I've seen. And you have no idea what you're talking about. And you cannot see what I've seen by looking at government statistics that are completely and totally biased toward a political initiative. You just can't do it. Yeah, okay, if you're done here, that's fine. If that's all it takes is to just tell you you're completely wrong, then we didn't need you in the first place, which is sad. Take good care. God bless you. And I hope that none of your friends die from the fentanyl that you have no problem coming into this nation. And I don't care whether an American citizen is doing it or not. They ought to be, President Trump said they ought to get the death penalty. I have to agree, whether they're Americans or not. That's just awful. Just awful. Yeah, I've been here. I've been there. All right. I got to go. I got to recover. It's been a bad day to begin with, and this last segment made it even worse. So there you go. God bless you. God bless all y'all. And I will see you tomorrow.